diamond store and check all the boxes on her wish list. 14.
It's Tri-City Sports Now. I'm Marky Billson, 1420 WEMB Sports Radio, and of course, www.jetbroadcasting.com. So yeah, check that out, allfortennessee.com, and my man Caleb. All right, let's talk about, I was talking a little bit about political correctness gone amok. You know, I talk about this a lot. As given the guys at the Beating Drum radio show like to come on, and we talk a little bit about how they've got a good point. All these people that want to change the names of teams, say because they have Native American imagery. I want to call the Dobbins-Bennett Indians the Red Elephants again. Never mind that Indians actually stems from back in the early 20s when Jim Thorpe actually taught football to a young Bobby Dodd and some of the first football players at Dobbins-Bennett. Yeah, that's where the nickname comes from. Did you know that? All right. And for that matter, Louis Sock-Alexis, and yes, that is very legitimate. I know that they have tried to use propaganda to say that the Indians were not named after Louis Sock-Alexis, but they were. Anyway, those have always been that way. Marquette used to be the Warriors. They're now the Eagles. Ooh, Warriors. And of course, I've always thought, Washington Bullets. Is there really a problem with that? Well, it's too violent. What shall we call the team? We'll call them the Wizards. Oh, named after a Klansman? Well, that's not what we're going after. But you see how that could be interpreted just as easily as bullets are too violent. All right. This has now gone to the next level. I am holding up on Facebook right now. This is Prospector Pete. Okay, now you say what you will about the logo. It's a caricature. I don't know. People say, you're too old-fashioned, Marky. It was the Coach's Daughter episode. Charlie Spikes watches the show on Facebook from time to time. Remember Coach telling his daughter, that when in that famous episode, which I was on First Run. So I remember I used to watch Cheers when it was on First Run. Oh, there's a sitcom about a former baseball player. That was my thing right there. I enjoyed it. Then I got into the romance of Sam and Diane and away from, Sam Malone was an ex-jock and I, fell away from it. But those early episodes, that sort of thing. Anyway, it was very critically acclaimed. But I mention that because in that episode, Diane Chambers was going around the bar saying, let me draw caricatures of the patrons. It will be a great, addition to Cheers, to the watering hole here, and all this. Sam says he didn't want to do it. Diane Chambers really does, this sort of thing. Well, this is a caricature, okay? It's a caricature of a prospector. Prospector Pete was the mascot of the Cal State Long Beach, what is their nickname here? It's been their mascot since 1949. It's a symbol of the California Gold Rush. So if you can imagine a caricature of a prospector, and he's got a pickaxe there, and, think about a 49er, a real 49er from 1849, and the Gold Rush, that sort of thing. And he's got a bandana and a vest and all that. And he's got himself a little cocked, smile and all this. This is Prospector Pete. I'm holding it up again on Facebook. Is this offensive? Well, evidently, Cal State Long Beach says yes. They have seized. According to the school, Prospector Pete was part of the Gold Rush, which was, quote, a time in history when the indigenous people of California endured subjugation, violence, and threats of genocide. I'm holding this logo up again. It's a picture. Are you getting genocide from that? If you got genocide from this picture on a Rorschach test, am I pronouncing that right? A Rorschach test. Got a stance where he's got, he's leaning, he's wearing a vest, a bandana, he's got kind of a crooked, smile. This is a time in history when the indigenous people of California endured subjugation, violence, and threats of genocide. That's what they're getting from this picture. I mean, I don't know what... It's absurd. But it isn't absurd because they've done it. As Phil Mushnick, who's been on this show, writes, one wonders how many indigenous people were displaced to build California's 23 state colleges, the first in San Jose in 1857. And to whom should California be? He then goes into Prospector Pete was laid to rest at a graveside service attended by Deputy Dog, the Great Gazoo, Hansel sans Gretel, and the widows of Heckle and Jekyll. Theater of absurd only if it was theater. Yeah, it isn't. Fascinating how those who demand unconstitutional are among those. You've taken away those Indian nicknames. Remember, then, that's sort of like cultural cleansing. Our friend Ken West of Politically Incorrect Baseball Fans, and I love the guy, and he's been on the show a few times. We had him talk about the World Series, I think, a few times and all this, just to have somebody on there. Because you know what? I'd rather have someone like Ken West on than somebody who wants to go on and talk about baseball like an algebra problem. I really would. But there's more. Let's see here. I've said this. There's all this talk about how bad baseball is drawing. Take a look at the Braves sweep this weekend in Miami. They drew 11,000 down in Miami, and it's a nice ballpark. They got the Clevelander there. It's where the Orange Bowl used to be. I mean, they drew 11,000 on Sunday. That was the largest crowd of the 3-game series. Anyway, Kate Smith's niece demands the cowardly Yankees let fans decide on the ban of Kate Smith. And I look at this and I say, this is more than just she sang a song we don't like now 85 years ago. And Phil Mushnick had a lot to say about that, and actually found out during World War II some gestures Kate Smith made that were anything but racist and such. So one must concern the times and all this. But the Yankees are Kate Smith. Instead, they're playing the melody on an organ. And I say, look, I mean, there's a specific message there. When you're not singing God Bless America, the lyrics, the religion that was a staple of Yankees games after 9/11 when they started to play it. And then fantastic. And, I'll tell you why. Because, the Yankees management has turned into brain-dead snowflakes. Did you know that when no one else in the U.S. would book her, Smith had Josephine Baker on her TV come forward and identify himself? I would love that. Sneeze is right. It is cowardly. Put it to a vote of Yankee fans. I guarantee 80% would ask for the song to be replayed, and I agree with that. And then he has something that is also after my heart, and I mentioned this Prospector Pete. Yeah, you know where I'm going with this. I'm talking about Chief Wahoo. The ultimate thing, this is where he's going to lose some people, because it's been a long, long time. But even so, I want to return back to the Colt 45s. I don't think that'll win. It's been a long time since the Astros were the Colt 45s, and it was a losing era for them. And you know what? They changed that. They weren't very good to begin with. Hey, we're moving into the eighth wonder of the world, the Astrodome. Let's call ourselves the Astros. I believe it's short for Astrodome. Was Houston associated with sports, or not sports, well, obviously they're associated with sports, but the space industry, let me get it right, and such. Then, by the way, West has the best story here. While we're at it, let Miami fans vote on whether to force Derek Jeter to retire as the head honcho of the Marlins. That is, if there are any. By the way, Ken actually has changed his opinion. This is okay with that. Changed his opinion because I know that he, when the Marlins were purging and, getting rid of so much of their history under the Jeter regime. And I would, need Jack McCann to be sticking around in his 80s as some sort of, one of the undeniable truths of sports. And I mean, one of my 18 undeniable sports truths, 18 undeniable sports truths. A franchise should take care of its legends. To the Miami Marlins, yeah. Jack McCann certainly is a legend. Yeah, keep him on the payroll. Even if it is just a, hey, would you come back here and glad hand with the fans and talk about the good old days? Because right now, that's all the Marlins got, is the good old days. And the Clevelander and the dancing girls there. I mean, we'll give you that, and all this. But anyway, yeah, there's a lot of problems in baseball. Bill Madden writes about it, and I can get to that a little bit later on in the program. But when we return, I want to talk a little bit more about Tennessee. Hey, Tennessee and Virginia Tech are in the running for a basketball recruit. Go. We'll also look at who's winning the NASCAR race and more. It's Tri-City Sports Now. I'm Marky Billson. And let's come back to, like I said, who are the Vols and the Hokies trying to nab? Yeah, we'll also talk a little bit about the hockey playoffs. I love that. And more. As I said, Tri-City Sports Now. We're coming back now that I've got the music up after this.